Hello, welcome to Critical Hits Horror Month. I'm Matthew.
I'm Kyle.
And I'm David.
And for this month, we'll be looking at classic horror stories and what makes them so good and worthwhile.
And the first movie we're going to be looking at is Stanley Kubrick's classic The Shining, the story of Jack Torrance, a struggling writer who moves into the Overlook Hotel as caretaker, alongside his wife and son. Everything seems fine at first, but then the hotel's dark history begins to manifest itself in some truly horrifying ways. And that's about as far as we can get with somebody without adding some interpretation into it. So,
yeah.
So obviously this is The Shining. It doesn't really need an introduction, even though we just gave it one. But so what do you guys think about it?
For one thing, I like that this is the oldest movie we've done as a group.
Yeah.
This is the oldest thing we've reviewed, so it's really nice looking back at this and kind of seeing how this movie has inspired other things. It's going to be really nice for this month of horror, seeing how this is so foundational for so much of the horror genre. I really appreciated both King and Kubrick's attention to detail when they're looking at the way in which psychic phenomena and that sort of mythos is attached to trauma and sexuality and these different things. And how this is very much a story both of character and setting, and how the plot seems to develop out of that. And it's the meeting of these two people with these traumatic pasts or some sort of inner turmoil going on inside this place that has obviously been affected by negative experiences by the previous people who had stayed at the hotel.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a cliche to say the environment of such and such movie was a character in and of itself, but here,
but in this case,
it's here. It's definitely there, and it's really earned.
This movie does a good job of doing the haunted house kind of trope in an interesting way, because it's not possessed by a single spirit. It's not like Poltergeist or something where it's got this one foundational reason for everything happening here.
Yeah.
This is a place that is being kind of sparked back into life by the particular people who are coming here, by Jack with all of his baggage, and by his kid who has The Shining, which is this sort of
it's basically
psychic powers.
Yeah, it's like the spotter location just absorbs problems into it.
It does, and because we have the murder of the previous caretaker's family. The murder suicide, the Donner Party reference.
It's an Indian burial
There's
ground
an Indian burial ground
reference.
There's another man has been there who has The Shining.
Yeah, it's like it's really interesting. It's like all of, like, the negative energy from all of these events. They all just kind of collected into one sort of pool of energy, and eventually, and sometimes it just sort of, it's almost like it gained a kind of self-awareness and just manifests itself.
Which is incredibly interesting when we're looking at this, to me also, because it's one of the oldest ones we're talking about, but it's also distinctly an American storytelling from a Stephen King novel, Stanley Kubrick filming, and so it's interesting to watch this horror story about the melting pot of bad becoming the monster.
That's a very Stephen King thing in general. Like, if you read his books, the common theme is that evil is almost this kind of tangible force that occasionally manifests itself and things that the characters in the books encounter.
But this movie doesn't give the absolute answers. It's not a place where you're like, oh, I know what that is. It's the ghost or the demon. It's even the end of the movie is so ambiguous that you kind of like have to scratch your head and be like, I'm not quite sure exactly what just happened here. But at the same time, you get these feelings throughout it. Like, it's an incredibly uncomfortable movie.
Along the lines of the Americana bit, you see Jack as a character who's kind of having the American dream fail for him. You get a little bit of that sense of his masculinity has been threatened by this. And this is very much a psychological horror.
Yes.
The hotel is kind of a mirror for who Jack is. For who Jack is, this kind of amalgam of negative events and his own past possession or what have you with alcohol or the abuse that's been in his past. And there's a really interesting way in which these two are feeding into one another and reflecting the state of the hotel is reflecting the state of the character.
Well, some of my favorite scenes are actually when Jack is interacting with the various sort of, for lack of a better word, ghosts of sort of the past hotel guests and members, and so he really is kind of talking to the mansion itself.
Those bar scenes with Lloyd.
Oh, the bar scenes are amazing, but both visually and just storytelling wise, because the mansion, it's usually such a sterile environment, and so when he walks into that hallway and you see this entire lavish party going on, it's such a change of pace that it's kind of unnerving, and so when you see Jack get to have a conversation with another human being who isn't his wife or his son, it feels so out of place. You can't help, you just sort of feel it in your spine.
Well, I think that's a big part of this movie is the conversations.
Yeah.
It's the the way this character has kind of annexed himself from his family.
Mm-hmm.
You see really early on at one point how he's all by himself in the room that kind of becomes his writing room. And kind of like, it's hearkening to the movie The Great Escape, where Steve McQueen's character is inside of the isolation, the cooler, basically, is what they called it. And he's throwing the ball back and forth completely by himself. Yeah. He doesn't even have anyone to play catch with. It's him and the wall.
Yeah.
So this is a guy who's kind of stagnating there and getting frozen and caught up in himself.
Yeah, and it's this giant hallway, but it's completely empty, and so it's just it's Jack alone. It's just him in the mansion.
Yeah.
That's who he's playing catch with. At that point,
exactly.
Really.
Yeah.
He's not engaging with his family. He's not talking to them. He's pushing his wife further and further away, to the point where he's cussing her out and telling her to get out of his writing space and never come in there.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't want her reading or editing his stuff.
Yeah.
There is some extreme isolation happening, which seems to be allowing the house then to speak into him.
To really kind of seduce him, even kind of literally at one point.
Yeah, very literally. That scene with the woman, it's really good psychological storytelling. She is the exact opposite of what his wife is.
Yeah.
His wife is this very insecure, mousy kind of person who can't say anything or stand up for herself.
To put it into perspective, the other major role that actress played was Olive Oil in the Popeye movie.
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's her.
Whereas
that is so funny.
In contrast, this woman that he sees, who turns out to be, one of the spirits, is this sexually confident, naked woman stepping out of the bathtub. There.
Yeah. And she stands up straight and everything. Like, she's taller than his wife, too. Like, everything physical about her, too, is intimidating.
He gets then seduced by that. He's then kissing her, and they're embraced when he suddenly feels something, and he looks into the mirror, into the reflection, and sees that it's a rotted corpse at that point that's laughing at him and pursuing him. And we slowly start to see his revulsion at this instance, at this house and these things. He transfers from the party of one of the people in the house being victimized to a part of it. He becomes the monster. He goes from being the pursued to being the pursuer. Yeah. And it's interesting that it happens at the moment when he believes his wife is doubting his integrity and how he would never harm their son.
Yeah. And notice that this entire conflict was brought on by the house originally, because what happens is Jack Torrance, he was an alcoholic, and so at one point he sort of kind of accidentally, kind of on purpose, hurt their son, and then that was the incident that caused him to give him up, and so he sort of.
It's also just to add to that, it's the point at which the psychic powers and the imaginary friend manifest themselves for the child.
Yeah. He's a recovering alcoholic, and then there's this one scene where the wife and mother, she finds that the son has been harmed. It looks like he's been strangled, and so she makes the pretty rational conclusion that it was the dad who harmed him, and that's
in a mansion where it's only the three of them.
Exactly, and so she thinks he harmed him, and so she yells at him and stuff like that and threatens him. And so, that's what actually makes him react. That sort of really starts this downward spiral. And so notice that what originally strangled him at first was presumably the same woman who Jack made out with later on.
Yeah, they're both a victim of that character.
Yeah, it's the hotel itself. It set up the conflict. It's really clever. It's dealing with Jack, but it's not. It's doing it intelligently. It's actually setting up these scenarios that will break him down.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. I love the way in which this is just constantly pressing on Jack again and again. I mean, he has this nightmare early on where he killed his wife and son, and he's horrified by it.
Yeah.
He's absolutely horrified. It's not... Throughout the movie, you can see that Jack is very disconnected and struggling and angry underneath it all.
Yeah.
But he still has legitimate care for them.
Yeah.
He really does care about these people.
Well, it's like in that scene where he has the dream and he wakes up and he's so upset. It's like that was sort of like one of the first attempts of the mansion reaching out for him, and he wasn't quite ready for something that explicit yet.
No. And it's at that point where his wife comes into his writing room where he has forbidden her from being, and she's comforting him, and he's not saying anything about it because she's there and she's supportive and he wants her there and he cares about her.
Yeah.
This kind of human interaction is very, very important to what's going on, and I think that when he begins to close himself off or get pushed away, that's when he seems to transition. And this movie plays with the horror idea, the horror trope, and psychological trope of the fear of the other really well. Mm-hmm. And when he starts to project that onto her, he starts to then transition. He slowly does become the other, which they should fear. He's swapped camps from being a member of the family to being the aggressor and a part of the house.
And he also, like, dehumanizes himself. He doesn't... That scene at the bathroom, the very famous scene, the conversation he's having through the door to his terrified wife who's holding that knife and hiding in the corner is so uncomfortable because of how disconnected it is from the context. Like, he's making references to children's stories.
He's calling himself the big bag wolf
right
there.
Like, he's joking around while trying to murder his daughter, his wife, and his son. And it's just this startling scene where you see this person who, throughout the entire movie, you're pretty uncomfortable with him. Like, I would say, at least. I was uncomfortable watching this character. He always seemed a little off.
He's off from the beginning. Like,
but
we
at the
don't
same time...
We don't want to make it sound like he's some kind of cherub at the beginning.
No, he's not.
But he's always off, and it always seems like he's on a different wavelength than everyone else around him.
But you can see he's finally cracked.
Yeah, like, he's lost any part of humanity. He's joined, like, the other team. And so, like, it's really fitting at the end with the picture of him in the 1920s somehow.
Because
as ambiguous as it is,
swapped camps and been absorbed into the house.
It's almost as if the house is saying he's part of
your mind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. There's a reason he doesn't get to leave like the others do.
And again, he's become frozen at the end there.
Yeah.
Which is part of his isolation and that monotony of ideas.
And he's frozen inside of the hedge maze.
Yeah.
So it's like he's like a permanent, like, he's almost
fixture,
he's now a fixture of the mansion itself.
But he's getting stuck in this place, and he's getting stuck in himself and stuck in the monotonous idea of all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy.
Yeah.
Which one of the creepiest scenes is watching the wife flip through all of those different pages.
Yeah.
And seeing that this is what he's been working on the whole time.
For months.
And seeing how he's broken in that way.
Yeah. It's so interesting how many characters get fixated on things that repeat. He gets the all work, no play makes Jack a dull boy. Their son's character has some sort of traumatic event where he becomes fixated with the words red rum, which backwards is murder, and he wants to say, like, him or the persona embodying him, whatever. It just constantly is on his lips. Like, he's yelling at it at one point at his mom while she's asleep, just like red rum, red rum. And it's really interesting to watch these people who were at least trying to function normally have broken down to the point where they're so fixated on things that they can't think of anything else. They become trapped within themselves, not just the house.
The trapping is a really good portion of this, because whether it's the maze or the roads or the house itself, you constantly have these long hallways that just feel so narrow, and like you're so forced. Even when they're being introduced to the room they're staying in, there's a sense of it's cozy. What it is it's claustrophobic.
Yeah.
This movie feels like a claustrophobic horror. You're stuck, you're trapped. In a way, that's one of the need to get out, the need to move to another spot. But then there's also, whenever there's motion, you don't know what's behind every corner.
Yeah.
And I think that there are a couple of different things of the horror genre this movie has laced together. It's not doing a single thing, and I think that's a strength of it. It has the psychological horror and the psychic thing, and then the psychic manifestation is standing in for like a supernatural force or what have you. I mean, what are some other horror bits that you guys see? Because I see the haunted house.
I would say,
even looking at it broadly, it starts out as a haunted house movie, then turns into kind of a slasher at the end.
It does.
Yeah.
He transforms into this almost limping, monstrous
he's like loping
creature.
Yeah.
As much as we've talked about the story, though, one thing I do want to say is this movie is good by story, like definition by character and stuff like that, but the way the story was made, that alone, like, just blows my mind. Like,
this is Kubrick, man.
The cinematic effects are so good. There's so many good scenes with the camera work is just incredible.
Following the kid on the trike, throughout
the camera, not knowing what's around each corner.
So brilliant.
Yeah. Well, what I found interesting was that it's almost kind of voyeuristic. Like, it almost feels as though you're in the hallway looking at the characters, and I wonder if that was almost like you're sort of seeing it from the house's perspective. Maybe.
Maybe.
It's a bit speculative, but that seems almost what he was going for.
And it's just so interesting because I watch a lot of horror movies, and a lot of times horror movies do this thing where, like, the music starts slowly and then it builds up, and you just start getting tense in your shoulders, like, what's going to happen, and then, oh my gosh, this happened. This movie doesn't approach the horror storytelling that way. What it does instead is, I'm going to make you uncomfortable for every single scene by not letting any scene have a complete end. So, like, the pacing itself cuts off scenes.
There are those beautiful transition screens with where they tell you what time it is or what day it is.
Yeah.
And they come, like, instantly. Like, they come, it almost feels, I don't want to say mid-scene because the thought is always completed.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, you would always expect there to be just a little, like, another 4 or 5 seconds of just of nothing before it transitioned, but it doesn't do that.
Nope, it cut you off right
it's
there.
abrupt, and that just makes it uncomfortable.
Your brain isn't given the chance to recover and digest what just happened. Like, you have to keep processing the entire time.
And those split seconds, he uses that in another place, and that's when the child or someone is noticing some manifestation of horror in the house there. There will be that instantaneous moment where the dead bodies are on the floor, and then it's back to just an empty hallway.
And it's so fast. It's almost subliminal, but it works so well because it's just so untraditional for how editing is usually done, but it still works, and that's what makes it so unsettling.
And the music itself too is also alarming. Like, it's gosh. Alien, and the way that it vibrates. Like, there are heartbeat sounds, and there are strings being pulled.
It's like very animalistic.
Yeah,
almost. It's just like
it's haunting.
Yeah, there's no melody and not even really any rhythm. It's just it's organized sound, but it's without any kind of discernible structure.
Right.
I think the closest other thing I can think of is Zimmer kind of plays with this a little bit in some of his stuff, where he starts slowly pulling that violin string
like the infamous sort of the Joker violin. It's almost like we're seeing sort of like, I don't know if anyone really did that before this film. I'm sure someone did in some sense.
Sure,
but it's like we're sort of seeing the early version of that.
Right. Yeah. And you get Williams with Jaws, that low hum that's kind of telling you that it's out there beneath the surface. I think that horn in the very beginning is telling you what's going on beneath the surface of this family, this car driving on the road.
Mm-hmm.
It's just every little detail has been built up to make you as a viewer as uncomfortable enough that you can get into a situation where you can feel for these characters.
Yeah.
Feel dramatically for them. Become worried with a heightened sense. It's very interesting to me because it's also such a limited cast. Like, most of the movie is 3 characters dealing with supernatural creatures or supernatural situations, at least. So you have this concept that's confined, yet you still worry deeply, will these 2 characters make it?
Yeah.
In a way, you still kind of worry about Jack's character.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, and I think that's just a testament to how good the film is on pretty much every level. The acting is amazing.
The acting is phenomenal.
The writing is amazing. It really gets by just little nuances with the characters. The cinematography, it puts us puts us into the story directly. The music just does the same thing.
From top to bottom, it's just perfect.
It totally
it's
deserves
an incredible
its reputation.
movie.
It's a great Kubrick movie.
And you can definitely see how, I don't know if it was the first one, but you can definitely see how this movie is the reason we have psychological thriller as a genre.
Yeah.
It's very different from, the Hitchcock style there, because it seems to bridge the gap between that older style and coming more into the gorier and the more frightening visuals that we have of the 80s and the 90s horror movies.
Yeah. I think this is just a great example of just what a classically good horror movie that works on the same level that classically good horror movies do.
Yeah. It's certainly a great starting point.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. What's our next movie, guys?
The Thing. It's the John Carpenter's The Thing.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so next time we're going to check out what happens when you have a creature feature meets horror. Tune in then.
See ya.